Well, I was going to come here today to talk about the demise of British politics and how some of our elected MPs and our unelected government are absolute garbage, and how the main opposition party, the Labour Party, are supposed to be the party that we're looking towards to get us out of these dangerous times. However, they're even more worse off than the party in question. But I can't do that now, can I? Why? Because Brexit rears its head again. For those of you that haven't heard, just in case you've had your head buried in work, or you actually just live under a rock, in the past 24 hours, the British High Court ruled a judgment that Article 50, that big red button I spoke about in the last episode, cannot be triggered and without Parliament's consent. So, Brexit doesn't actually mean Brexit, does it now, Theresa May? I've got two people here with me to discuss this today, so put down your makeup brushes, put down your PlayStation pads, stop watching TV, stay tuned. This is One Man's Opinion.
Audio Jungle.
With me this evening, I've got Kay Quadri.
Hello everyone.
And I've got Ade Oshinoye.
Hi guys.
So guys, I want to get straight into this because we don't have a lot of time. Obviously you both know what has happened today. The British judges has invoked British law to show the British people what the British Parliament is in fact there for. A famous quote by a guy named Mark Twain. Now Mark Twain said that if voting made any difference, they wouldn't let us do it. What do you have to say on that, first of all?
I would say it's an interesting quote, simply because if we take a look at the fallout that's happened since the referendum actually happened, what you have is politicians on one side saying, well, the people don't necessarily know what's best for them, and Parliament should ignore them and vote and decide against that in the people's best interests. And I guess, well, the people, I guess, have had an opportunity to directly outcome the influence of a policy decision, i.e. even the EU, for the first time in such a long time. And that's totally thrown British politics into disarray, so I guess you could say that Mark Twain was quite right.
Yeah, so the people have voted, however, now they're telling us that Parliament may get the last say. How do you feel about that?
I think this is one of the most interesting times in British politics. I mean, the Parliament have been given powers by the High Court now, effectively, to have a vote on whether or not we leave the EU. Or should I put it, how we leave the EU? Because make no mistake, we are going to leave the EU.
Do you really think so?
That's what people have voted for. Now, in my humble opinion, everyone's going to come back to their senses and have a rethink about what leaving the EU really means.
Do you feel that those that voted Brexit, their vote is being taken away from them by the ruling that has been made by the High Court today?
Absolutely not necessarily. I think that what the High Court has done today has just given a legality to Brexit rather than taking the vote away from the people. So it's giving us legal backings to actually get out of Europe.
So,
Brexit really means.
Okay, so I want to throw another question out there. So 17 million people voted to leave, as you both know.
Yes.
Now, if this goes to Parliament and Parliament gets to vote, do you think that MPs should be voting based on what their constituents vote? And let me just explain what this means really quickly. I live in Greenwich, for instance. My MP is Matthew Pennycock. He's the MP for Greenwich and Woolwich. We voted to remain in my constituent. If this goes to Parliament, should Matthew Pennycock be essentially voting to remain just because we that live in these constituents voted remain? What do you think about that, guys?
Well, I would say I'm a strong believer in the trustee model of representation. I don't think he should be, or any MP should be compelled to vote along the lines of their constituency at all.
But don't you think there will be silencing the will of the British people if they don't follow what the British people have said?
Well, it's an interesting one because if we go back to the reason why people vote in the first place, or the reason why you vote for your MP, you tend to vote for your MP based on what party they're from. You don't necessarily always know who your MP actually is. I mean, most MPs are in safe seats. So them being, elected by their constituents doesn't necessarily mean that they always have to share the same opinions as their constituents.
But the fact of the matter
the reason why they voted it.
The fact of the matter is, I live in a specific area. The majority of the people that live in this specific area has voted to leave the EU. That vote has been taken away from me. It's been taken to Parliament. You now have to say what I feel. We elected you. You now have to portray what your constituents feel. Should you not be voting the same way as the members of your constituent?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that the vote's been taken away from them, because you just have
17 million people will say that to you.
Yeah, well, you just have to follow the process. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. Regardless of the fact that we have had that referendum, there does still need to be that step of Parliament ratifying it.
What can I just say? I completely disagree. I mean, I think the British public have voted to leave the EU based on several reasons, right? And the majority, if we're talking about democracy and setting standards across the world, British democracy is actually looked upon as an envious democracy around the world. So if the majority of the British people have voted to leave the EU, what you should do as an MP of whatever constituency you're from is to respect the vote of the British people and vote to leave the EU. Now, Theresa May has said the government has said they're going to go to the Supreme Court to challenge this. Now, in my opinion, that's a waste of time. What we need to do right now is to give Parliament the power required to put this to Parliament to vote.
And you feel like Parliament should be voting according to what their constituents...
Absolutely.
Now, there's been this notion that Parliament are not delegates. They are... they're not there to delegate the voice of their constituents. They're there to make decisions based on what they believe is in the best interest of their constituents. So even if they believe that leaving the EU is not in the best interest of their constituents, which is not the best interest of the country, do you still think that they should be voting the same way as their constituents
have? If it's not in the best interest of the country, why did we have a referendum? We shouldn't have voted in the first place. Now, the moment you... And but let's not forget that having this referendum went through Parliament. Parliament had to ratify the decision to have a referendum.
So you're saying
so
they've already voted?
It's public. Now the public have said we want out of the EU. Now I agree we might not have a plan of what Brexit really means at the moment, but we can make it up as we go along. Turkey has some sort of agreement with the EU. Norway has a model.
That's very correct. That's very correct.
Canada has another thing. We can have
let's let him interject here.
Tailor-made one.
Just to come back on that point in terms of Parliament essentially abrogating their responsibility in inverted commas. I guess that is just an admission by the previous government's failure to actually explain to everybody. Although we have voted to give you the opportunity to vote on an issue, it still needs to come back to us, and I think that's what's causing the major problem. Is people never expected that they'd still need to be that.
I'm just aware of time here, and Kay said something that I wanted to bring up. He spoke about democracy. Is democracy being taken away from the people with the ruling that has been made by the High Court today? Because democratically, the people have voted that they want to leave the EU. That's democracy. That's direct democracy in its finest form. After the people vote, we should be carrying out what the people have said.
Democracy is more than voting. Democracy is the respect for due process. Democracy is the respect for the various arms and machinery of government itself, understanding the relationship and respecting the relationship between the legislature. You say due process. The due process essentially is you put a referendum to the public. Should we leave the EU, yes or no? Due process said 17 million people voted to leave. Shouldn't your due process take you down the route of leaving the EU without anything going to court? Not necessarily, because at the end you still have to, I guess, tick all those boxes. It's a box ticking exercise.
But the box has already been ticked by Parliament.
But in terms of protecting democracy also, a big part of the reason why British democracy is so respected worldwide is the stability of it.
Okay.
If we go, for instance, we take Egypt into account, they introduced a democratic system, and basically Egypt has disintegrated over the years. And a big part of it actually is protecting the actual stability of government itself. So while you can, I guess, there is an element of direct democracy. In a country of 65 million people, 66 million people that Britain is now, I wouldn't say that's the most equitable form of democracy.
So I am not a big fan of referendums. I've never been a big fan of them. But once you've now crossed that step or that line of having a referendum, you've got to listen to what the people are telling you. Whatever government you are, whatever you've decided to vote on, if the will of the people is to be taken out of Europe, and clearly we don't know what that means at the moment, we should respect the will of the people.
But would you say...
Can I just say that, going back to your question, that is democracy being taken away from the people? No, actually, I think this ruling is a good thing for the government, because now it has a legal standing to go back to the parliament and actually get the will of the British people done. So with this ruling today, what we need now is for Brexit to be put to the parliament.
I'm going to pose some questions to you, and I just want simple, straight, quick answers, just so that the people can know where you stand. Yeah? First question, I'm anticipating a general election, simply because Theresa May doesn't have the mandate, and with the ruling that has been made today, she has even less of a mandate now. In the case of a general election, I'm praying next year, who would you vote for?
Well, as a Labour Party member, I guess I could only vote one way, or not vote at all.
Even with the party politics that's going on with Labour?
Yeah, because as far as I'm concerned, the most important thing is the party itself and not personalities.
Oh,
so
interesting.
We need to face the job at hand if we are going to face a general election. Put a proper, outlook to the people.
I like that. Die hard Labour. Who would you vote for?
It's a difficult one. I'm anticipating, or I'm expecting, a third force, simply because clearly the Conservative government at the moment is unacceptable, and our main opposition, the Labour Party, is in total disarray. Now we've had Lib Dem been out of mainstream politics for what, 5 years?
Since the coalition?
Since Nick Clegg, and UKIP are throwing each other out of the European Parliament.
Don't get me started on Nigel Farage.
So I am expecting a third force, consisting of what we call the Blairites of the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats.
So the new Labour, you would say?
Yeah, so the new Labour, the now old new Labour, and the Liberal Democrats.
Last question, hard Brexit, soft Brexit, or no Brexit?
Yeah, it would be no Brexit for me.
No Brexit whatsoever?
No.
Even though 17 million people have voted to leave, no Brexit for you?
Yeah, well, I tend to take a long-term view of things. I think it was kind of spurred by misinformation.
Lies?
Yeah, you could say. I wouldn't say that, but what I would say is misinformation and a very insular or navel-gazing view of Europe itself. I think there's a lot more.
Too many words. I would say it was spurred by absolute lies. Hard Brexit, soft Brexit, or no Brexit?
Well, I'm a Democrat, so I mean, even though I accept the patriotic decision of the British people to leave the European Union, I absolutely despise the moral outcome of this. But I would say the British people have voted to leave. I don't believe there's anything called hard Brexit or soft Brexit. We should just get on with it and go ahead and Brexit.
Whatever that means. Brexit means Brexit, right? Listen, you've heard it from these two gentlemen here. You've heard it on one man's opinion. We want you to make your own opinions, form your own opinions, and get at us. Email us, Instagram us, get at us with your questions. If you want to come onto the show and sit right here and debate on the political issues that are currently happening in these troubling times with this wayward government, get at me. This is One Man's Opinion.